What's up guys? Let's talk about arena defense in Raid, something that people often ask me about and something that every player in the game has to use and think about, no matter if you're pushing for top 20 in Platinum Arena or if you just want to push higher in Tag Team Arena or get to gold in Classic Arena and so on. Now, the meta is quite different in Live Arena than everything else, because in Live Arena both teams can pick 5 champions and you can't pick the same ones, and you can also ban one champion from the enemy team. That kind of changes the dynamic a lot. That's why people use different builds and different strategies there. But this video is mostly only gonna apply to Classic Arena and Tag Team Arena. But of course the same champions are generally relevant or meta in both, but there's some slight nuances, and the goal in Tag Team Arena and Classic Arena defense is a bit different than in Live Arena. But basically the PvP, let's actually take a look at the top charts right now, but it's not the best example because people hide their actual defenses during midweek, and we'll take a look at the last week's top 30 in a second. But the main principle that you see in defense, or that applies to it, the important thing isn't actually to win. This might surprise many people, but you can totally win rank 1 in Platinum Arena without getting a single victory in defense. That's not really the main thing. Now, good accounts do get wins in defense, and generally everybody does, because if you don't have insanely good account, then you're probably not high enough that only insanely good accounts attack you, and chances are that you're actually still getting some wins. But even the top accounts, they mostly lose in defense. Very rare it is that somebody mostly wins in defense, unless the meta just shifted and they have something really strong and new that other people don't know how to fight against. I've definitely had few times where I've had that as well. But the two main things that you need to do or have in your team to make a good defense team, and you can have either one of these or both of them, often both, but the metas kind of come and go and there's a little bit variation and nuances to this. But the two basic types of defense teams, if we just look at the teams right now, and these are not the top meta teams, but as an example. So the one thing is speed threat. That means something like a lockout champion. It could be Armans, it could be Grixia, Galatir, it could even be Tormin. Something that, well, Tormin is slightly different, but it's the same thing. It's CC threat. Usually it's speed threat, but there's a couple other ones like Hegemon and Tormin, who are CC threats. They are kind of speed threats as well, because if they have that and they have some fast champions in the team, they kind of force you to, you can't go with your Arbiter and just turn meter boost. It makes a bit harder that way. But one thing is to have some kind of speed threat that will CC your team and forces you to either go first, or then you need to have some big countermeasures, like how can you beat a team that locked you out? Well, there isn't really too many ways to do it. Either you need to be able to unlock out your own team, which is basically, the old way used to be Kaimar, but it's very hard to actually build a resistance Kaimar because accuracy is at massive advantage. I have made videos about it, but the way it's calculated, accuracy has 42 advantage on the numbers over resistance. But the other way would just be having a team that can kill the enemy team, even if you're locked out. Now, there has been many ways that people can or have been able to do it in the past, but it's generally hard and makes the fight slower, so it's a bit iffy. And the second method would be to make a tanky stall team that is so slow fight against enemies that even if they know they can beat it, it takes too long time and it's not even worth attacking you. And it kind of varies in the meta. Sometimes it's only speed teams, sometimes it's only tanky go second teams, or it can be a hybrid version of them. I think in the recent times most often it's a hybrid version, but in the super early days of Platinum Arena, basically every defense was Hegemon and Lockout, and then Rotos, and whoever as the last champion. It could be Duchess, Siphi, or Arbiter. Then at some point you will just see Lockout with either Tormin or Hegemon and no nuker. No, not a single team had any nukers at all, because it wasn't worth attacking those teams and it would be way too long to beat it. But there has been many iterations, and let's actually take a look at the current iteration. Or if I just quickly mention, like, so some speed threats I kind of already mentioned. It could be Armans, it could be any lockout champion, even Galatir, who has lockdown, but it's a debuff and not the normal lockout. What are the other popular ones? Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Like Tormin, some like lower tier options would be maybe Tormin or Wukong with Polymorph and so on, but the main ones are definitely Lockout and Armans in the current meta. To some extent it could just be a very fast team that has something like Charged, but these are very hard to pull off. Some people can do it. If you're, let's say, top 5 fastest player in the game, you might be able to pull it off with good win rate, but there is very few people that can do it. But this kind of defense is basically always viable no matter what the meta, generally. But then for the go second teams that make the fight so slow that enemy team don't want to attack you, some of the popular stuff would be Taras and Maritska and UDK in the current meta, but in the past it has been stuff like Nekret and Ursuka. People might forget, but both of them used to be meta. Actually, I think they were released same time or around the same time, but originally Ursuka was considered the better one, and Nekret wasn't that popular. It was used in offense but not defense at all, but Ursuka could make teams insanely tanky with all of the passive damage mitigation that you stacked with other stuff like Duchess passive, Bulwark, Siphi defense buff, many other things. But in the past, if I quickly show couple epic champions, some people might remember that even something like Seeker used to be popular in defense, and like it was so good that it was literally used in Platinum. I know that that might sound funny, but the power creep has gone big. But there's actually, well, there's multiple this type of epics. I would say Seeker, Vokot, and Sandlash Survivor. I almost forgot that champion's name because it's so long. But all of these, for instance, have been used in top Platinum defenses, like actually on reset by people. Like, not to flex, but I have finished with Vokot in Classic Arena defense countless times. Like, literally multiple dozens of times, but it's so long time ago that it's kind of not that big deal anymore. But my point is that these kind of champions are still good in, for instance, tag team arena defense. If you don't have the best account in the game and you're not fighting the other best accounts. But where can I find Seeker? So Seeker, for instance, had the passive that if he gets hit, when he gets critical hit, then he will give defense buff to your own team. And he was very relevant during the Tranda meta, when Tranda was the best nuker in offense. And, well, because the first hit will proc it, and then the second hit will be with the defense buff. They are not applied at the same time. And actually both Vokot and Sandlash Survivor were meta during that time as well. Vokot was good against many other things like Candy, not just Tranda. And originally it was actually nerfed, but Vokot would heal with his passive in between Tranda AoE attacks, making it very hard for Tranda to one-shot your team, and literally impossible to one-shot your Rotos because of his passive and like Tranda only being able to do 50% of his HP, and then Wokot healing in between those. It was a funny thing. I think it only lasted for a couple months. Even Last Survivor had a passive like this. It has been used by many people, even at high levels of Platinum. I remember Maxan used to use it as well and made a couple videos about it. But he has a passive that puts ally protection on the team and block damage on her if you take damage. I think does Kyoku have something similar, or was it an active skill? I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. Okay, so yeah, that's an active skill, but she also does have the Seeker passive basically. But this kind of stuff is good deterrent in defense, something to consider even if you don't have the top choices. But let's actually talk about the current meta and how does it look in the modern times, not just talking about the past, like past memories and so on. Let me unscreen myself so that you can actually see it. I'm trying to work on this and do better. But this is the meta right now. I'm sure many people are very familiar with it. It was actually recently changed a little bit because of the release of White King Narses, and let's talk about that and give some examples of the current meta and why people use these champions. Of course, the top Platinum players, they don't use defenses just because they are good in general, but they use defense teams that are good against the current meta offenses, and that's why the defenses change time to time when we get better offense setups and vice versa. They kind of depend on each other's and either one can affect the other. But as you can see, mostly we are seeing combination of Taras, Maritska, UDK and Lockout. It could be Grixia, Galatir. In the past it used to be Yumeko and Warlord, but these two new shiny primal champions are far superior than the old Lockouts. But you will basically see Galatir and Grixia. They are the main speed threats that we can see in these top 30 teams. Okay, that's too close. Some other speed threats that we can see here would be this Yumeko and Hegemon. Hegemon is kind of funny because I don't think I have seen a Hegemon in a while, but he used to be super meta, so it kind of does make sense. I would say that this kind of super fast team, which this one is, it's actually not that tanky at all. These can still be viable. They have always been viable. If you are, let's say, top 10 of the fastest accounts in the game, you can, in every meta basically, go for a speed team. You can even run like Sifi, Lockout and Leorios. I know some people do run it, I don't know if we can find it here, but you can literally run offense teams, maybe with Leorios, maybe with Charged, if you are super fast. But even if you can see a couple people with teams like this, don't expect that you can do it in Platinum Arena, though it's definitely something to consider putting in Classic Arena defense. Okay, so other speed threats apart from Lockout and well, basically different Lockouts, we had the Hegemon. Here is Armans, it's the same thing. If he goes first, then he will remove your turn meter, stun you and polymorph you. And if you don't go first, pretty much you're gonna lose. Now, that's not always the case, but it generally is that way, and in either way it's probably gonna make the fight a lot slower and add a big risk to it, even if it's not guaranteed loss. And that's another factor actually. We could maybe even almost add it as a third defense type of setup. It's not really a third one, but it's something that you always want to have in mind that can supplement both of them, and that is RNG. That's why stuff like Reaction Proc and Rotos A1 and so on, these things can be very good, because if you can make it RNG, like you can make it slow by having very tanky team, you can make it so that enemy can't win because they go first and lock you out, or you could have some RNG that makes it unsafe team for enemies to fight. Generally both of those two can be this as well, but if the enemy player knows that it's not a safe team, they might avoid attacking you, and that's another good thing to add onto your team. But I think that's pretty much, yeah, that's all of the speed threats that we can see in the current meta. Like I mentioned, it could be many things. It has been Tormin and even Hegemon in the past, and I'm sure there will be other champions in the future. It can even be something like, I don't know, even attack down, like Madame Ceres was kind of like that in the past, or I don't even remember what the champion is called, Lissandra, basically anything, but you get my point. You could use whatever epic champions you have, even if you don't have the meta stuff. Then for the style options, why do we see UDK in almost every single team? Well, there is a good reason for it, and it kind of relates to what I said before, that the meta defense and offense kind of synergize with each other, or they have like negative synergy, but people are of course gonna run champions that are good against the meta offense teams, and Narses is of course gonna be very good against Taras and Marichka. That is the reason for running it. Now, people are gonna run Stoneskin now instead of Bolster, and I would say that in general Stoneskin is definitely better, and most teams are not gonna be running any Bolster at all because of Narses. But outside of Narses offense, of course Taras offense is very popular, and double Taras offense, it's usually like double Taras, maybe like Kaimar, and then a champion with lots of buffs. It could be Sifi or Elva or whoever basically, and or some combination of those with Mariska. And when you have double Taras, both of them are gonna attack the enemy with A1 and A2, and well, both of them are gonna attack with A1 as well when Mariska does her A1. That team works very well against other teams with lockout. That's why it's very safe and consistent offense team. One of the very rare few ways to safely fight against enemy teams with speed threat in the form of lockout. The double Taras offense team can easily do it, but if they have UDK in the team, it's gonna make that fight a lot harder, even if you might probably beat it in the end depending on the actual matchups and builds and so on, but it's certainly gonna make the fight way slower, and that's why UDK is that starly defensive deterrence and so popular. Now there's definitely other matchups here as well. If half of the teams didn't have UDK, then one way to beat lockout defenses of course would be with the good old-fashioned Sifi and Rotos. People basically run pretty much the same thing as with double Taras offense. That you will run 2 Rotos, Sifi, and either Kaimar or Yumeko, and that pretty much could auto any type of defense team in the old metas. It can't quite do it nowadays because every team has UDK, but you get my point. And yeah, that's pretty much the current meta in nutshell. I'm not gonna go through every single champion. Oh, actually, I should mention one more thing. Harima is definitely good for the Starly defense things as well. She isn't that popular in defense, never quite has been, but in the current meta when Narses A2 ignores the enemy passives, except Harima, stuff like Nekret, Ursuga, even Duchess, all of these have been top of the meta in the past. In some old metas, every single defense team had at least 2 out of those 3, often even all 3. But the reason why you are not seeing any of them right now is Narses. They could easily make a comeback if something happens with Narses, or there's a good counter to it, something like UDK but for Narses, let's say. And that's why stuff like Siphi defense buff and Siphi defense buff, Maritzka passive revive, and which was the champion that I was looking at? The one that, oh yeah, Harima, and Harima passive. Those are the current ways to mitigate and go for those Stali defense team, apart from UDK and Taras and so on. Those stuff like Ursuga and Negreto and the other ones, Duchess, they might not be relevant in top of the meta in Classic Arena or Platinum Arena, but in Tag Team Arena, enemy are gonna need 3 offense teams, and it's definitely gonna work there, but it's a bit different because in Classic Arena people are only gonna use the best team that they have and also put all of the best gear on their account to those main champions. And that's another thing also to take into mind. Kind of like I mentioned already, that these things come and go with the metas. Right now, Bolster isn't very good and is kind of advised not to use, specifically for Classic Arena. I would still run it in Tag Team Arena defense, but because Narses gets the double hit if enemy has shield or strengthen, you're not gonna see any of this. Instead, you're gonna see a lot of stone skin on the enemy teams, and that is something that you want to take into account right now and go with those. But apart from the like meta sets and stuff, like is reaction better, is stone skin better, these things kind of come and go, and often you want to mix mash multiple different things to make your team hard to beat and maybe hard to predict as well. Except right now you don't really want to use Bolster in Classic Arena defense. But apart from that, one last thing that is very relevant when you build a good defense team, it's mostly about what champions you have and what works against the current meta offenses. But of course the gear and builds are very big parts as well. And like you kind of want to think about not just the item sets that you have, but how good gear you have in different item sets and for what kind of builds. For instance, if you are not super fast, then you probably don't want to run your lockout in defense. But if you are, then you definitely do. So it kind of depends. Like, I'm not gonna run my 331 speed arbiter in defense, let's put it that way. But also, even if we talk around the same builds, let's say Stone Skin. Now you can have multiple different types of builds in Stone Skin. Here for instance, I have my Ankara in kind of slowish medium speed, very tanky build. Now don't laugh at the one piece speed boost. This is because I already have one Stone Skin accessory, and ideally I would get another accessory and then I can make a 2-piece set. But right now I'm just going with the tanky boots that I have. It looks weird, but it makes sense. But you kind of want to categorize what kind of builds you use on different champions. So this is a medium speed, super tanky Stone Skin build. Now some other champion like let's say your Nuker might be, where do I have my Helicat? Your Nuker might be in a fast 4-piece Stone Skin build. You want to save those pieces for your... Why can't I find my Helicat? Oh, there, in the middle of the screen. You want to save these pieces for Helicat, you don't want to put them on the other stuff. Then for the Ankara, we wanted the medium speed stuff. Then on UDK, for instance, we want absolutely 0 speed in gear. And you want to make sure that you have the correct type of build on the different champions. And sometimes I might have like one slightly better gear that I could put on somebody, but I put it on somebody else just to have the optimal set for him, even though somebody else could use that kind of piece. And also, like I mentioned, if you can't make a fast speed build for lockout, then don't use that. If you can't make tanky slow stone skin build for UDK, and you have other options with better gear that is more suited for them, you want to take all of these into account and build a type of defense team that your champions, not only them, but also your gear allows you to. This is probably been maybe a little bit slower video or longer video than I intended to make. I wanted to make it super short, but of course there was a lot of things to talk about, and I maybe rambled and repeated myself a little bit, but I hope this helps you. I hope you get the point. If you have any additional questions or comments, then hit me up. And if anybody is wondering why there was no video yesterday, it's kind of funny thing to say, because I was supposed to make this video yesterday, but my PC, I got some new PC parts on Friday. I made 2 videos on Friday, but after those I got the new parts from mail, and then when I built my PC it stopped working, and I thought I broke something. I rebuilt it a couple times. By couple times I mean like 10 times. I took everything apart and put them back. I thought I broke something, even though I didn't really like nothing visibly broke, and I didn't like be rough or anything. Anyway, so I didn't have PC on Friday or Friday evening. I also didn't have it on Saturday at all. That's why there was no video. I thought I had to wait for Monday to have somebody fix on my computer. I did try to fix my PC on Saturday as well, but then on Sunday I woke up, I did like my one last Hail Mary and rebuilt my PC for one last time, and for some reason now it works perfectly, and I'm not quite sure what I did wrong on the other times. The only thing that I did differently, but it's so small thing that it can't be it, I don't think, but I noticed that there was a small amount of thermal based on like the on the board right next to my CPU cooler. There was a little bit of thermal paste, so little bit that I didn't even notice it before, but maybe that fixed it, who knows. But I'm back to making videos. I'm still gonna make the AFK Journey second channel. Probably today I'll make a community post if that is up, but AFK Journey has good PvP. The graphics might not be for everybody. I played the game during the beta. I also did make 2 sponsored videos for them, but I have no affiliate link, and this video or this ad isn't sponsored, let's say. But I'm gonna make videos for that game. Make sure to subscribe on my second channel. I will maybe add link to this, or I will just make the community post. And if you're interested about the game, then look it up and try. I have made 2 videos about it as well. But anyway, that's it. Have a nice weekend and see ya.